Hello BookTube, my name is Elizabeth. Welcome or welcome back to my channel, Book as in Books. We are at the beginning of November, and that means it is time for Nonfiction November, which is the greatest readathon of the year. It is a readathon created by Olive from the channel A Book Olive. I'm going to leave a link in the description box below, of course. And she invites us to read more nonfiction than we usually do. So if you never read nonfiction, just pick one. If you sometimes read nonfiction, this is the time to read just a bit more. For my part, I'm going to aim for 5 books. So far this year, I think my average has been 3 nonfiction books per month on an average. But last year it was closer to 4 nonfictions a month. So I'm going to try to aim for 5 this month. Also, Olive gives us prompts, and they are one-word prompt, and we are invited to use them as creatively as we want. So the prompts this year are code, path, shot, and join. And in the previous years, I've tried to fit the books that I wanted to read with one of the prompts, and I tried to use all of the prompts. And I thought this year, wouldn't it be fun if I could fit all of the books in just one prompt? So I started to think, okay, which prompt would be the best use for that? So I thought, okay, well, one easy way would be to use code, because all the books that I have are printed books, and writing is a form of code. You can only understand it if you have been initiated to it. So there's that, but it's a bit too easy. I want a challenge. So, okay, so how about path? Okay, path. Well, perhaps every book can count, because every book that I'm going to read is creating a path through my TBR, or every book that I'm going to read is creating the path of my reading history. Okay, yeah, again, it's a bit easy. Then, of course, there's shot. Olive suggests the simple interpretation of saying you're giving the book a shot. So, again, I'm giving every book that I'm going to read, I'm giving them a shot. So that could all fit. Okay, how about join? Well, if I read a nonfiction, I'm joining Olive in her challenge. I'm joining the BookTube community. So every nonfiction book that I'm going to read in November is going to fit with the prompt join. That's not a challenge. I want a bit of a challenge. So I thought a bit more, and I came up with a challenge that was a bit more interesting. And I decided to use the word join. And I tried to join every book of my TBR to the next. So pick one book and join it to the next book. Take this book and join it to the next. To create a chain of possibilities. Not so much a pile of possibilities, but a chain of possibilities. So let's see how I've done, how I've managed. So my starting point would be a book that I've already started. So basically in November, I want to finish reading this book, which is Bibliomaniac, an obsessive tour of the bookshops of Britain by Robert Ince. The title pretty much says it all. It's about the comedian, I guess, and scientist Robin Ince, who is going on a bookshop tour, giving talks to 100 different bookstores in Britain. So that's the first one I want to read. Next, another book about books. The Index of Prohibited Books by Vose. As the title says, this is about the list of books that good Catholics are not supposed to read. So this index is made by the Vatican, and the Vatican is in Rome. So this is a cultural, visual, and personal history by Robert Hughes. And Rome is in Italy, just as is the region of Basilicata. So this is A Season in Basilicata by Yeadon. This is another book that I started I'm already quite advanced. I'm almost at the halfway point. So I am at page 178, and there's 400 of them. So I want to finish that in November. So from a book set in Italy, we move on to another book set in Italy that I've already started too. So this is The Land Where Lemon Grows, The Story of Italy and Its Citrus Fruits by Helena Atlee. And this book I started to read as a buddy read for Nonfiction November last year. My buddy reader was Ellie from the channel Ellie's Cozy Chronicle. And for some reason, we sort of stalled. more than halfway through, about 2/3 through, we sort of stalled. It was good. It's not the fault of the book. It was just the circumstances that decided that we could not finish the book. But hopefully I'm going to finish it this year. So The Land Where Lemon Grows. Lemons? This is Bitter Lemons of Cyprus by Laurence Durrell. So this is about his stay in Cyprus at the end of the 1950s. I think. And Laurence Durrell is more known for fiction that he wrote, 4 books that are called the Alexandria Quartet. And Alexandria is a city in Egypt. This. I don't know what the title in English is. If it exists in English, this is a translation from Spanish. So that would be, I don't know how roseau, what's the word for roseau in English? So that would be the plant where papyrus comes from. So this is about the invention of papyrus and basically the invention of manuscripts and of reading eventually. So manuscripts. This is Meetings with Remarkable Manuscripts, 12 Journeys into the Medieval World by Christopher de Hamel. It's a beautiful book that I bought earlier this year. We have photographs of manuscripts and of the people who wrote them or ordered them or bought them or yeah. So this is going to be a beautiful read. From manuscript we go to Manuscript, the bookseller of Florence, the story of the manuscripts that illuminated the Renaissance. And this is by Ross King, an author that I really like. As you can see, because I have this other book also by Ross King, Mad Enchantment, which is about Monet and the painting of the water lilies. And I also have this book by Ross King, Defiant Spirits, which is about the Group of 7, which is a group of Canadian painters. And in that group of Canadian painters, there's the painter, I forgot his first name, Harris. Who painted this? He painted this, which is on the cover of this catalog that I bought. It's not just photographs, there's a lot to read, that I bought at the Art Gallery of Ontario, and it is called Canadian Art. So this is about the Canadian art collection. And then from Canadian art, we move on to Your Brain on Art. This is How the Arts Transform Us by Susan Magsamen and Ivy Ross. So this is a scientific book that shows you how art affects your brain, how it soothes the mind and makes you healthier brain-wise and gives you a sound mind. How I fell in love with classical music and decided to rewrite its entire history by Paul Morley. So as the subtitle says, this is a history of classical music. Music is made with chord. I heard there was a secret chord. Music and medicine. So this is again a science book about how music can help regenerate the brain. Not just the brain, I think it's how music is healing. I think the author is a neuroscientist, so I think it focuses on the brain, but it might also focus on, talk about other diseases and other conditions. So the author is Danielle J. Levitin, that you may know also from This Is Your Brain on Music, and the author is a professor at McGill University in Montreal. Montreal is in the province of Quebec, this is, you can probably guess, there's the word university in the title. So from a teacher at a university in the province of Quebec, from another teacher at university in the province of Quebec. This is an essay. The title, word for word, if it is translated in English, would be Panique at University. So political correctness, woke, and other imaginary threats. So this is an essay about a cultural topic that is rather relevant nowadays. Another cultural topic that is rather relevant. All the single ladies. Have you heard lately of childless single cat ladies? Childless cat ladies. That's what we've heard. Childless cat ladies. I don't have a cat. Anyway, All the Single Ladies, Unmarried Women and the Rise of an Independent Nation by Rebecca Traister. Why are women not getting married? Perhaps they saw some examples that they thought, well, perhaps that woman shouldn't have got married. Perhaps she should have stayed single, like the Duchess of Windsor. This is a biography by Charles Higham. So you may, oh, there's no portrait on the cover. Here's a portrait of the lady in question. Before she was the Duchess of Windsor, she was known as Wallis Simpson, an American divorcee who had the audacity to aspire to marry a future king of England. The man did become king, and it was unthinkable that the head of the Anglican Church marry a divorced woman, even though the Anglican Church was created for Henry VIII to be able to remarry while his first wife was still alive. This is Edward VIII ended up abdicating to be able to marry Wallis Simpson, and they were given the title of Duke and Duchess of Windsor. So this is the biography of the Duchess of Windsor, a scandalous woman. Another scandalous woman, Ophelia. This is Paris in the Age of Manet by Otto Friedrich. Ophelia is this lady here, the muse, or perhaps, I don't know if it's her real name, but the scandalous lady on this very famous painting by Manet. And this book is about 19th century Paris. So we are supposed to meet in this book Napoleon III, Empress Eugenie, Wagner, Flaubert, Bismarck, Offenbach, Proust, Degas, Haussmann, Zola, and others. Did I just mention Zola? And suppose you were to see Zola, what would you say? You would say, "Bonjour, Monsieur Zola." This is by Armand Lanoux, so this is a biography of Émile Zola. So Zola is a writer known for his series De Rougon-Macquart, but he's also known for his political action, political up to a point. The main aspect of his involvement in public life was that he wrote a pamphlet, I guess that's how you can call it, a piece, an article, in an opinion piece, that's the word that I want to use, in a newspaper that was called J'accuse, so I am accusing, and that was aimed at bringing the Dreyfus affair into in front of civil tribunals instead of military tribunals. So Dreyfus was a military officer who was accused of treason, and the only reason he was accused and convicted was because he was Jewish and not because he had committed the crime. And at the time he was convicted, it was not quite clear, but at the first trial, then there was a second trial, and by the second trial, it was clear that the man was innocent, but he was convicted a second time. So Zola played a big role into bringing this affair in front of the public eye. This was unfortunately just a prelude to what would happen later in the 20th century when it comes to anti-Semitism. Of course, the next step would be the concentration camps, and this is Pillar of Salt by Albert Memmi, and this is a memoir of surviving the concentration camps. So this is a World War II book. And then World War II, well, World War II. In Canada, the issue, not just the issue, but the main issue during World War II, political issue, was conscription. Should there be a conscription to force every man of eligible age to enlist and fight in the war? And this is the conscription crisis. So this is an essay on the topic. When I presented this book in the book hall from the 1950s, I said something very stupid about the author. I confused the author, well, actually fused together the author, who is a politician and a respected journalist, with a comedian. They happen to be related, so they're somewhat cousins, so they look like one another, and, well, yeah, a little bit, they look like one another, so that's why I confused them. So he's not a comedian, as I said in my previous video, he's just a journalist, so the author's just a journalist. So from World War II, we stay with World War II. A Bridge Too Far by Cornelius Ryan. This is about the Battle of Arnhem in 1940, does it say? 3, 4? I don't know exactly, I'm not entirely sure. And this is the last battle. So author of A Bridge Too Far and The Longest Day. So it's either about the Battle of the Bulge or the Fall of Berlin. April 1945, Nazi Germany stood on the brink of defeat. Okay, it's about the fall of Berlin. So the last battle. And then we stay with World War II. However, we go on the Asian front. This is The Damned. The Canadians and the Battle of Hong Kong and the Prisoner of War Experience, 1941 to 1945 by Nathan M. Greenfield. So we are talking about war. We are in Asia. What next? Into the silence. The Great War. Mallory and the Conquest of Everest. Everest is in Asia. So war in Asia. By Wade Davis. So as you can guess, this is about the first serious attempt at reaching the summit of Mount Everest. And this became the stuff of legend. Now, of course, Mallory and his climbing buddy Irvine disappeared. I think the body of Mallory was found a few years ago, but in 1920 something, they just disappeared. And the question remains, have they ever reached the summit or not? So there's something quintessentially British about this story. These young men full of energy and just wanting to climb a mountain because the mountain is there. And no questions asked. We are gentlemen, and we are, I don't know, we have values of sportsmanship and values of exploration, and just, yeah, there's something quintessentially British about this. And what else is quintessentially British? Shakespeare. So this is 1599, A Year in the Life of William Shakespeare by James Shapiro. And somewhat in the same vein, by the same author, is The Year of Lear, which is Shakespeare in 1606. Now these are two books with a date in the title. So here's another one, 1491, by Charles C. Mann. And this is New Revelations of the Americas Before Columbus. So this is about the Americas before Columbus. And if you went to the Americas before Columbus, what could you do? Perhaps you could go in search of the Mayas. This is by Victor W. von Hagen. This is a translation from English, I think. I think the original was in English. And this is a biography of the two archaeologists from the 19th century who rediscovered the Maya culture. So they found buildings, they found the writings. I don't know if they succeeded in deciphering it. I think it took a couple of generations of researchers before they managed to decipher the writing. But he's one, the two people in this book, they are John Lloyd Stephens and Frederick Catherwood. So these are the two men who sort of rediscovered the Maya culture. And someone who did something similar about 100 years later, not even 100 years later, a few decades later, was Hiram Bingham, who discovered Machu Picchu. So he just basically turned right at Machu Picchu. Yes, he did receive indications, but maybe it was not that simple. So this is Rediscovering the Lost City One Step at a Time by Mark Adams. So in this book, the author decides to retrace the steps of Hiram Bingham and to rediscover, I guess, Machu Picchu, even though thousands of tourists go there every year. And this book is fun, and I think it's a classic. It's a modern classic, or it's about to become a classic of travel literature. And a classic of travel literature is Time of Gifts. A Time of Gifts by Patrick Leigh Fermor, and the sequel, which is Between the Woods and the Water, again by Patrick Leigh Fermor. And this is about his travels throughout Europe. So he started on the shore, I believe, of the North Sea in the Netherlands, and he wanted to go all the way to Constantinople. And I believe he did that on foot. I'm not entirely sure, but I think he did that on foot. So this is a classic travel tale. And a place where you can read classic travel tales is in the book of Unforgettable Journeys, published by Condé Nast Travelers. So great writers on great places. As you can see from the cover, there are travel stories from all over the world. And somebody who traveled all over the world is James Cook. This is The Extraordinary Voyages of Captain James Cook by Nicholas Thomas. Rather self-explanatory. And one of the places where Captain James Cook traveled was on the Atlantic. This is a book by Simon Winchester. And in this book, we are promised great sea battles, heroic discoveries, titanic storms, and a vast ocean of a million stories. And if you were to travel on the Atlantic, a place where you could stop would be Congo. This is a history by David van Raybroek. I started to read this book in November of last year, and I believe this is an oral history. So the author tried to interview as many people as he could from as many different backgrounds as he could. And among other things, he found a man who, when he interviewed him, was extremely old by all accounts, and his account was credible. What he was saying matched up other records that we have, and apparently this man, who was like 120 years old perhaps, when the author talked to him, had witnessed the arrival of the Europeans in Congo. So this is a history of living memory of Congo. And that is a little bit something that we see here, not entirely. So this is Thompson Highway, Permanent Astonishment, which is a memoir. So Thompson Highway is indigenous, and he was brought up in the traditional lifestyle. His parents were nomadic, and he and his brother were taken everywhere. So in the winter, they traveled by sleds. In the summer, they traveled by canoes, and their parents were hunting, fishing, finding fruits and vegetables on the land. And I believe he's one of the last to have been raised this way. As far as I know, it is not a way of living that is very much in vogue. So he's one of the last people to have been raised on this traditional lifestyle. It's not the book that I've started. I think that also could be a theme for my Nonfiction November. Finish books that you've started. But I stopped for no good reason, because it was a very, very good book. Yeah. So Permanent Astonishment, and a synonym for astonishing could be jaw-dropping. Here we have a blurb by Stephen Fry that says, jaw-droppingly wonderful. This is Through the Language Glass. Why the world looks different in other languages by Guy Deutscher. So this is a book about languages. It would be a reread because I've read it before. But it's super interesting. So we see here the world, and we see here the world by Simon Sebag Montefiore. Again, the theme of a book that I've started and have not yet finished. For Nonfiction November last year, I said I had one objective. I wanted to read this book. And I started it, and I sort of ran out of steam around Christmas, and I haven't picked it up since. So perhaps maybe this year I'll pick it up and I'll finish it. And I don't need to go all the way back to the beginning. It's the sort of book that I could pick up where I left, perhaps go back a few pages or to the beginning of the chapter. Yes, I'm pretty sure I can pick it up where I left. So this is The World, a book that I want to finish. And on the theme of a book that I have started and that I want to finish, we have Bibliomaniac by Robert Ince. And we are back at the beginning of the chain. So it's a circular chain. Oh, I should have worn a chain. Oh, I should have put on a chain. I didn't think about it. But anyway, we are back at the beginning and ready to start a whole new chain, because I have other nonfiction books on my TBR, and I'm pretty sure I could manage to link them in one way or another. It was a lot of fun to create these links between the books. Now, of course, the chances that I read all of these books, this entire chain of books, is null. There are 40 books in that chain. That's more than one book a day, including a few that are well over 500 pages. So no, it's not going to happen. I'm not going to read them all. And I'm not going to read them in order either. I'm just going to pick the ones that I want to read. So chances are that at the end of Nonfiction November, I'm just going to present what I have read and have the book fit one of the prompts, so a bit more traditionally. So for example, the books on war can easily fit the prompt shot. The books on art and the brain and music and the brain, that could fit the prompt path, because I'm thinking of brain pathways in the brain. And the books about books, they could fit the word code, not because they are written. Yes, of course there's that. But before a book was called a book, it was called a codex. So there's the name code in codex. So that would fit the prompt too. And of course, I'm sure I can find, oh, and the travel books, of course, they all fit the prompt path also. So I will have no difficulty fitting the books I want to read with the prompts. So that's probably going to happen at the end of the month. Now, of course, whenever I do a TBR, or in this particular case, it's not a pile of possibilities, it's a chain of possibilities, I end up reading like 1 or 2 books of the entire pile. And I think this Nonfiction November will be no exception, because I've put on hold a bunch of, not a bunch, like 4 or 5 nonfiction books at the library, and I see my number is sort of coming up. I am now 5th on 4 copies, so that means I'm getting the book in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So chances are I will have other books to show you at the end of the month. But that's all part of the fun. So that's it, and thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed seeing me trying to link the books between them, and let me know in the comments if you thought it was fun or how you could link your own books in this way. That could be fun too. And I'm going to see you in the next video. À la prochaine!